Devon Ashworth was 38 years old, and until that Tuesday morning, he believed he had a good marriage. Not perfect, but real. He was a facilities operations manager who worked overtime without complaint, loved without keeping score, and had just secured a home equity line to fully fund his wife Patrice's dream business. He arrived at her hospital room with her favorite flowers, birds of paradise, rehearsing how he'd deliver the news. The door was slightly open. Voices inside. He raised his hand to knock, and then he heard it. His wife's voice, unguarded, telling her best friend that she loved him like a cousin, harmless and familiar, that she'd been planning her exit for 2 years, that what she needed from Devon wasn't love. It was his credit score and his silence. He stood completely still in that hallway. He did not drop the flowers. He did not make a sound. And in that moment, Devon Ashworth made a decision that Patrice never saw coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The birds of paradise were Patrice's favorite. Devon had driven 20 minutes out of his way to get them, past the gas station roses and the grocery store carnations and the sad little buckets of daisies sitting in cloudy water. He'd gone to the florist on Clement Street, the one with the green awning and the hand-painted sign, because Patrice always said that place got them fresh. The flowers sat on the passenger seat now, wrapped in brown paper, orange and purple petals fanned out like something tropical and alive. The morning light came through the windshield and caught them just right. Devon kept his eyes on the road. It was a Tuesday. He'd been at work by 6, handled a ventilation issue in the east wing of the warehouse, approved 2 maintenance schedules, and fielded a call from a parts supplier who always called too early and talked too long. By 9, he had everything covered and handed the morning off to his assistant coordinator, Marcus, who was good and getting better. Take care of your people, and they'll take care of the work. His father had told him that. Devon believed it. He merged onto the highway and let the traffic carry him. Patrice had been admitted Sunday night. The appendix, sudden, sharp, no warning. She'd called him from the kitchen floor, voice tight. And Devon had been in the car before she finished the sentence. He'd held her hand through intake, sat in the waiting room for 3 hours, slept in the chair beside her bed until the nurses said she was stable, and told him, gently but firmly, that he should go home and rest. He didn't sleep when he got home. He lay on top of the covers in his work clothes and stared at the ceiling and thought about her face when the pain was bad, the way she'd squeezed his fingers without looking at him, like she needed the grip more than the comfort. He'd showered, changed, gone to work. He was good at forward motion, always had been. Now he was almost there, and he had something to tell her. Something he'd been sitting on for a week because the timing hadn't felt right. The home equity line had come through, approved for enough to cover the full launch of her event planning company, the website, the branding, the seed capital for the first 3 events. Everything she'd mapped out in the business plan, she'd revised 4 times on the dining room table, while Devon made sure there was coffee in the pot and kept his mouth shut about the hours. 3 years he'd watched her build towards something. He'd worked overtime without making it a conversation. He'd covered the dental emergency in February without hesitation. $1,400 he hadn't planned for. Paid without ceremony, because that was what you did when someone was yours. He'd never kept score. That wasn't who he was. He'd rehearsed telling her about the equity line. Not because he needed the words to be perfect, but because he wanted them to be right. Wanted her face to know he'd done this on purpose, that it wasn't luck, that he'd wanted this for her. He thought maybe she'd cry a little. Patrice didn't cry often, and when she did, it was always quiet, just her eyes going soft before she pulled herself back together. He was looking forward to seeing that. The hospital came into view. Devon pulled into the visitor's lot, cut the engine, and sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. The flowers leaned against the seat beside him, He picked them up carefully. The third floor was quiet, the way hospitals always were mid-morning. The rush of early rounds finished, the hum of machines steady and low, the hallway smelling faintly of antiseptic and recycled air. Devon nodded at a nurse he recognized from Sunday night. She smiled back. Room 314 was at the end of the corridor. He walked the way he always walked, unhurried, solid, like a man who knew where he was going and wasn't in a rush to prove it. The flowers were in his left hand, his jacket was straight, and somewhere in his chest there was a quiet warmth that had been sitting there since he left the florist. He was almost at the door when he heard voices. The door was slightly open. Not wide, just a gap, maybe 4 inches, enough for sound to travel. He recognized Audra's voice first. Patrice's best friend since college. She was laughing at something, the way Audra always laughed, a little too easily. Devon slowed. He didn't want to interrupt. He stood just to the side of the doorframe, flowers at his side, and raised his hand to knock. Then he heard Patrice's voice, and the words came through the gap clearly. Too clearly to mishear, too specific to explain away. Devon's hand stayed in the air. He did not knock. Devon did not move. His hand was still raised, still aimed at the door. The knuckles never made contact. Patrice's voice was different when she didn't know anyone was listening. Looser. The careful warmth she carried in public was gone, and what was underneath it was something Devon had never heard before. Light, almost bored, like she was describing a problem she'd already solved. "I love Devon," she was saying. "I do, but it's like, you know how you love a cousin? Familiar, harmless. You're glad he exists, but you're not exactly choosing him." Audra said something low. Devon couldn't catch it. I know. Patrice's voice again, a small laugh trailing behind it. "I should have left 2 years ago. I almost did. But the business wasn't ready, and I wasn't ready, and you know how it is. Timing is everything." Devon lowered his hand slowly. He pressed his back against the wall beside the doorframe. The flowers hung at his side. "He's a good man," Audra said, louder this time. Devon heard it clearly. "He is." Patrice didn't miss a beat. "He is absolutely a good man. He is also the best investment I ever made." A pause. "That equity line is almost finalized. Once the business launches, and I've got 12 months of revenue under me, I'm gone. Clean. I've already thought through most of it." The hallway was empty in both directions. A monitor beeped somewhere down the corridor. The fluorescent lights buzzed at a frequency Devon had never noticed before. "You've really thought about this," Audra said. She wasn't pushing back. She was catching up. "I've been thinking about it for 3 years. Simple. Easy. The way someone talks about a plan that's already finished in their mind. Like the thing is done, and the world just hasn't caught up yet. Then, Trent asked about me." Devon's jaw tightened. "Trent Fairfax." Patrice said the name the way people say names that mean something to them, soft at the edges, a little careful. "We had lunch last month. He drove up from Charlotte. It was—" She let the sentence breathe. It was like no time had passed. "You know how it is when someone just gets you?" Audra's voice again, quieter. "Patrice, I know." The dismissal was gentle, but absolute. "I know what you're going to say. But what Trent and I have is real. It was real in college, and it's real now. I've spent 5 years pretending otherwise, and I'm tired of it. He's married to you, Patrice." Audra's voice had a tremor in it now. "Devon, he works himself half to death for you. You know that." A soft sound. Maybe Patrice shifting in the bed. Maybe a shrug. "Good men are everywhere, Audra." Flat. Certain. The tone of someone who had thought through every possible objection and found them all manageable. "What I need right now is his credit score and his silence. That's it. That's all I need from him. And when the time comes, I'll handle it cleanly. He'll be fine. Men like Devon always land on their feet. Devon stood with his back against the wall. He was not shaking. He noticed that. He'd half expected to be some physical response to match the size of what he was hearing, but his hands were still. His breathing was even. The flowers were just flowers, orange and purple and carefully chosen, and he held them at his side like they weighed nothing at all. He stood there for another moment. Then he turned and walked back down the hallway. Not fast, not slow. The same pace he'd come in with, steady and even. The walk of a man who knew where he was going. He passed the nurse's station. He passed the door of a room where a television was playing. He passed the family waiting area with the plastic chairs and the stack of old magazines and the window that looked out onto the parking structure. He found a chair near the elevator bank. He sat down. He put the flowers on the chair beside him. The brown paper crinkled once and went still. He put his hands on his knees. He looked at the elevator doors. He sat like that for a while, long enough for the elevator to open and close twice, long enough for an orderly to pass with a cart and nod at him without stopping, long enough for something inside him to move from one place to another. He wasn't sure what to call it, only that it had shifted, and he understood that certain things were going to be different now. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out his phone. He opened his messages. He scrolled to Kwame Ose's name. He typed one line. "I need to see you tomorrow. Your office." He pressed send. He put the phone back in his pocket. He sat for another moment. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and picked up the flowers. He carried them back down the hall toward room 314. He knocked. He waited. When Patrice said, "Come in," Devon opened the door and smiled at her. "Hey," he said. "How are you feeling?" He held out the flowers. Devon stayed 2 hours. He sat in the chair beside Patrice's bed, the one with the thin cushion and the metal armrests, and he was everything she expected him to be. Attentive, warm. He refilled her water cup without being asked. He laughed at the right moments. When she reached for his hand, he gave it. The flowers went into a plastic pitcher on the windowsill. The nurses didn't have a proper vase. The birds of paradise looked too vivid against the white walls, too alive for that room. Devon didn't look at them again. Audra left 20 minutes after he arrived. She had hugged Patrice carefully, avoiding the surgical site, and then turned to Devon with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. He returned it with one that did. "She needs her rest," Audra said to Devon, like a warning dressed up as consideration. "She'll get it," Devon said. "I'll make sure." He slept in their bed that night with 5 inches between them, which was normal. He ate breakfast the next morning and asked Patrice what she wanted before he went to the cafeteria, which was also normal. He carried her discharge bag over his left shoulder and brought the car around to the hospital entrance and helped her into the passenger seat like a man who had no reason to do otherwise. She touched his arm as he pulled out of the parking structure. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she said. He kept his eyes on the road. "You'd figure it out," he said, and smiled a little, and she took it as warmth. He got her settled at home. Pillows arranged, medication on the nightstand, television remote within reach, a full glass of water, and a bowl of crackers on the side table because she'd mentioned her appetite wasn't back yet. He told her he had to go into work for a few hours. She said she understood. She said she'd sleep. He drove to Kwame's office and arrived at 11:14 in the morning. Kwame Ose's firm occupied the second floor of a narrow building on Clement Street, above a dry cleaner and across from a parking garage. The waiting area had 2 leather chairs, a small table with no magazines, and a receptionist named Donna, who had worked there for 11 years and knew not to ask questions. She showed Devon in without announcement. Kwame was standing when Devon entered. He had already cleared the chairs in front of his desk, moved the files that usually occupied one of them to the credenza behind him. He had been expecting the call since Devon's text the night before. They shook hands. They sat. Devon recounted everything. He did it the same way he did everything, methodically, from the beginning, without editorializing. He told Kwame where he'd parked. He told Kwame what he was carrying. He told Kwame the exact moment he'd stopped walking. And then he said what Patrice said, almost verbatim, including the pauses, including the laugh. Kwame listened without interrupting. His expression did not change. He had a yellow legal pad in front of him and a pen in his hand, and he wrote nothing down during the telling, only after it was finished. "How long ago was the lunch with Trent Fairfax?" he asked. "She said last month." Kwame wrote something. Then he set his pen down flat on the pad. "There's something you need to know," he said. "I've been trying to decide for a while whether it was my place to tell you." He looked at Devon directly. 6 months ago, Patrice contacted a family law attorney, a colleague of mine. Different firm. No conflict with my practice. She was exploring her options. The consultation was confidential, but the fact of the inquiry isn't. My colleague mentioned it in passing without details. The name came up in a context that made it register. Devon held Kwame's gaze. "She's been planning this," Kwame said. He said it plainly, without softening it. "This isn't a feeling that got out of hand. It's a project." A beat passed. Then another. "How long has she been building it, do you think?" Devon asked. "Based on what you've told me? At least 2 years of intention." "Probably longer." Devon nodded once. He looked at the window. Then he looked back at Kwame. "I need to understand the full picture before I do anything. Financially. Legally. I need to know what I'm looking at." "Then we start with documentation," Kwame said. "Joint accounts, individual accounts, any business expenses you've covered, the equity line application, everything. I need a timeline and I need receipts wherever you can get them." Devon took out his phone and opened his notes. He was already making a list. He made dinner that evening. Chicken soup, her idea, his execution. They ate together at the kitchen table, Patrice still moving slowly. And Devon asked her whether she needed anything before bed. She said no. She kissed him on the cheek. She said good night. He watched the light go out under the bedroom door. Then he sat back down at the kitchen table in the dark. He did not turn the light on. He reached across to the counter where he kept a legal pad for grocery lists and household notes, and he pulled it toward him, and he clicked his pen. He began to write. Devon was up at 5:30. He folded the legal pad in half and slid it into the bottom of his work bag, beneath his spare charger and the dog-eared copy of a facilities manual he hadn't opened in 2 months. Then he washed his hands at the kitchen sink, dried them on the dish towel, and started the coffee. By the time Patrice stirred, the eggs were done, and the toast was warm and the orange juice was poured. He heard her moving slowly down the hallway, the careful shuffle of someone still tender around the midsection, and he had a plate waiting at her spot before she reached the kitchen doorway. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I know," he said. He set a fork down beside the plate. "How's the pain this morning?" "Better." She lowered herself into the chair gently, one hand braced on the table. "Maybe a 5. Take the ibuprofen with breakfast." "Not on an empty stomach?" "Yes, doctor," she said, and smiled at him. He smiled back. He was very good at it. She slept a lot those first few days. That was expected. The doctor had said as much. Devon worked from home when he could, and went into the office when he had to. And in the hours between errands and meal preparation and the ordinary maintenance of a house where someone is healing, he sat at the desk in the spare bedroom with his laptop open and he worked through the accounts. He started with the joint checking. He had access to 3 years of statements through the bank's online portal, and he went through them the way he went through everything, methodically, from the beginning, without skipping. He was looking for a pattern, and patterns, once you knew to look, were not hard to find. The transfers were the first thing. Small at first. $300 here, $250 there. All moved to an account he recognized as Patrice's private savings, the one she'd had before they married, the one she occasionally used for what she called personal expenses. He had never questioned it. He had never had reason to. But the amounts had grown, and the frequency had increased. And over the course of 36 months, Devon calculated that just under $19,000 had moved from their joint account into that account without a single conversation. He wrote the figure down on a fresh legal pad. He kept his handwriting small and even. The cash withdrawals came next. He cross-referenced the dates against his own work calendar. The overtime weekends were easy to identify. He had logged them all for his HR records, and the alignment was not subtle. Saturday mornings, he was at the logistics facility running emergency operations. $200 would leave an ATM 4 miles from their house. The same ATM, mostly. The same increments. He photographed each statement with his phone. Steady hands, clean angles. Every number legible. The business expenses took more attention. Patrice had a business account she used for the event planning work she was building toward, and Devon had been depositing money into it regularly for 2 years. Seed money, she called it. Working capital for vendor relationships and licensing fees, and the professional memberships that were, she said, essential to getting the right clients. He pulled every receipt she had ever shared with him. He cross-referenced vendor names against what she'd described to him in conversation. Some of it matched. Enough of it didn't. He built a column for the discrepancies. He was careful not to assume. He only wrote down what he could see and confirm. Assumptions were not useful. Documented facts were. He found Trent Fairfax on a Thursday afternoon, while Patrice was napping. LinkedIn first. The profile was maintained carefully. Professional headshot, clean layout. The kind of page that said, "I take this seriously," without saying it outright. Trent was 39. He ran a boutique marketing consultancy out of a shared office space in Midtown. His listed skills were vague in the way that service industry skills often were. Brand strategy, stakeholder communications, executive positioning. But his endorsements were real, and his connections numbered in the high hundreds. Devon clicked through to his business website. Minimal design, confident copy. The client section listed 6 names, all mid-size regional companies. The testimonials were complimentary and specific enough to be genuine. He found a regional business journal profile from 2 years prior. Trent had been described as a connector, someone whose value is as much about who he knows as what he does. Devon read that sentence twice. A man like that, his whole operation running on introductions and goodwill and the careful cultivation of professional trust, was only as stable as his reputation. His consultancy had no product, no inventory, no infrastructure. It had relationships. Devon noted this. He did not decide anything. He simply noted it, the way he noted everything useful, and kept scrolling. He called Kwame from the car that evening. "I pulled everything on Fairfax," Devon said. "Small operation, word-of-mouth dependent, maybe 6 clients at a time." A pause on Kwame's end. "Interesting timing. A fraternity brother of mine, Marcus, corporate communications director over at Dunmore Group, mentioned last week that Fairfax's firm reached out about a contract. They're still in early conversations." Devon watched a light change at the intersection ahead of him. "Is that right?" "That's right," Kwame said. Neither of them said anything further about it. That night, Devon closed the laptop, squared the documents into a manila folder, and slid it into his work bag beside the legal pad. He zipped the bag closed. He set it beside the desk chair. He walked to the bedroom doorway. The room was dark, except for the thin light coming in around the curtain edges. Patrice was on her side, one hand tucked under the pillow, her breathing slow and even. Her hair was loose across the pillow. She looked, in that light, the way she had looked when he first loved her. He stood in the doorway and looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached up and pulled the door almost closed, leaving just an inch of space. He went back to the spare bedroom. He had more work to do. Devon called her at 9:15 in the morning, after Patrice had taken her medication. and settled back into the bedroom with a book. He kept his voice easy, warm, the voice of a man who had nothing on his mind except doing something nice for his wife. "Audra, hey, sorry to call out of nowhere." He leaned against the kitchen counter, coffee mug in his other hand. "I've been thinking about doing something small for Patrice, now that she's recovering. Just a few people, low-key at the house. Nothing that would wear her out. I thought maybe you could help me coordinate." A brief pause on her end. "Oh, yeah, of course. That's really sweet, Devon. I know she'd want you involved," he said. "You're her person." Another pause, shorter. "Sure. When were you thinking?" "That's actually what I wanted to talk through. Are you free this week? Coffee?" They met Thursday morning at a place called Cornerstone on the east side. Neutral ground, busy enough to feel public, quiet enough to talk. Devon arrived first. He chose a table near the window, ordered a drip coffee, and was reading something on his phone when Audra came in. She looked tired, or something adjacent to tired, the particular look of a person who has been carrying something they weren't built to carry for longer than they expected. Devon stood when he saw her, smiled. "Thanks for coming out." "Of course." She unwound her scarf and sat across from him, both hands wrapping around her cup before it had even finished being set down. "How's she doing? Really?" "Better every day," Devon said. "Still sore. You know, Patrice, she's not great at slowing down." Audra laughed, small and genuine. "No, she is not. Has she seemed stressed to you lately?" Devon asked. His tone was conversational. "Concerned husband? Nothing more. Before the surgery, I mean. I kept feeling like something was weighing on her and I couldn't get her to talk about it." Audra's eyes moved to her cup. "I mean, the business stuff. That's always on her mind." "Right." Devon nodded slowly. "The launch timeline. She's been anxious about that." "Yeah." Audra turned her cup a quarter rotation. "The usual things. Has she mentioned anything specific? I just want to understand what she's dealing with, so I'm not adding pressure." "No, nothing specific." Audra's voice was a little too flat, a little too settled. The voice of a woman who had practiced saying nothing specific and was hoping she'd gotten good at it. Devon didn't push. He just nodded again, thoughtful, and let the silence sit for a beat before steering them toward venues and guest lists and whether Patrice would prefer afternoon or evening. He was pleasant and practical and completely unrevealing. And by the time they were 40 minutes in, Audra had visibly relaxed, her shoulders down from her ears, her hands loose around the cup instead of gripping it. She thought she had gotten through it. Devon let her think that. He picked up the tab without making anything of it, and they walked toward the door together, and he held it open for her, and they were standing on the sidewalk in the thin morning light when he stopped and looked at her directly. "Audra." His voice was quiet, steady, not accusing, not pleading. "I need you to know that I'm not the man Patrice told you I was." Her face changed. Just slightly. A small movement around the eyes, a tightening at the corners of her mouth. It was enough. "When this is over," Devon said, "I hope you remember that." He didn't wait for her to respond. He gave her a single nod, the kind that closed a conversation without slamming it, and he walked to his car. Audra called Patrice before Devon had reached the highway. He knew she would. That evening, Patrice mentioned she was tired and went to bed early. Devon waited until her light went off. Then he opened his laptop at the desk in the spare bedroom and pulled up their shared family calendar. He had used it for years, for his work schedule, for home maintenance appointments, for the kind of ordinary domestic record-keeping that builds up quietly over a marriage. Patrice used it, too, with less consistency, but enough that the entries were there. He went back 18 months. He matched every cash withdrawal date he had documented against her calendar entries. The alignment was exact. 3 withdrawals fell on a weekend she had marked Nashville. Girls' trip. Two more matched a Friday she had listed as Vendor MTG, Charlotte. Another cluster appeared around a long weekend labeled simply A plus me, Spa. Devon wrote down the Charlotte entry. He noted the date. He opened a browser tab. The hotel took 3 calls to reach the right department. He was patient. He explained calmly that he was trying to verify a stay for tax documentation purposes, that his wife had expensed the trip, and he needed to confirm it appeared under the correct name for their records. The third person he spoke to confirmed it without hesitation. The reservation had been made under Patrice Ashworth and Trent Fairfax. 2 guests. A king room. Devon wrote that down too. He wrote it clearly, with the date, and the hotel name, and the representative's name, and the time of the call. He slid the page into the manila folder behind the bank records. He closed the notebook. He carried his glass to the kitchen sink and filled it with cold water, and stood there, both hands wrapped around it, looking out at the dark backyard for a long moment. Then he turned off the light and went to bed. Devon arrived at Kwame's office at 8:40 in the morning, 20 minutes before Kwame's first scheduled appointment. The receptionist waved him through without a word. She had seen him before. She knew what kind of visit this was. Kwame was standing at his window when Devon came in, coffee in hand, looking out at the street below. He turned when he heard the door and gestured to the chair across from his desk without ceremony. Devon sat. He placed the manila folder on the desk between them, flat and square, and folded his hands on top of it. "Everything?" Kwame asked. "Everything." Kwame set down his coffee. He opened the folder and went through it the way he went through everything, methodically, without expression, giving each page the full weight of his attention before moving to the next. The bank records, the transfer documentation, the financial discrepancy timeline Devon had built date by date, the hotel confirmation, and at the back, paper-clipped separately, the equity line approval letter, the one Patrice was still waiting for Devon to finalize. Kwame read for 11 minutes. Devon did not speak. He watched the window. When Kwame closed the folder, he leaned back in his chair and looked at Devon for a moment without saying anything. Then he said, "She built this on a foundation that doesn't exist." Devon said nothing. Kwame turned the folder so its edge aligned with the corner of his desk. A habit. Let's go through it. The business hasn't launched. There are no business assets, no inventory, no accounts receivable, no established client base, no LLC with operating history. There is nothing to divide, because there is nothing that legally exists yet. Whatever she was counting on taking from the business is paper. It is an idea. Courts don't split ideas. Devon nodded once. The equity line. Kwame tapped the paper-clipped letter. It's approved, but it has not been drawn. Not $1. You can withdraw that application, and she has no grounds to compel you to finalize it. It was never marital money. It was potential marital debt that you chose not to take on. That choice is entirely yours to make. I already called the lender, Devon said. Not yet. But I know what I'm doing. Kwame accepted this without comment. The account transfers. The ones into the private account. The cash withdrawals. He opened the folder again briefly, glancing at the timeline. This is dissipation. She was diverting marital funds for personal use unrelated to the marriage. I can argue this aggressively. A judge will want to see it. A judge will care about it. It shifts the equitable distribution calculus significantly in your favor. He closed the folder again. And the house. He paused just a beat to let it land. You inherited the house 14 months before you married Patrice. It never lost its character as separate property. There was no commingling, no refinancing that brought her onto title, no legal action that folded it into marital assets. Devon. He looked at him directly. She cannot touch that house. Her attorney is going to tell her the same thing I'm telling you, and it is going to be the worst moment of her planning process. The room was quiet for a moment. Devon looked at the folder. He thought about Patrice 3 nights ago, settled on the couch with her feet tucked under her, asking him about the equity line timeline with a softness in her voice that he now understood completely. He thought about the house, the one his uncle left him, the one he had repainted the summer before Patrice moved in, room by room, every weekend, alone. "I want to wait," he said, "before you file." Kwame raised an eyebrow slightly. Not surprised, just listening. "One more piece," Devon said. "I'll know it when I have it." Kwame nodded. That was enough. Devon shifted in his chair. "There's something else." He told Kwame what he had found about Trent Fairfax, the boutique consultancy, the thin client roster, the complete dependence on personal referrals and professional relationships. Then he mentioned what Kwame had told him on the phone. His fraternity brother, the corporate communications director, recently approached by Trent's firm for a contract. Still in discussion, Kwame listened without moving. When Devon finished, Kwame was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been meaning to catch up with Marcus anyway. We're overdue." He picked up his coffee. "I won't say anything that isn't true." Devon looked at him. "I know you won't." That was the end of it. He was home by 10:30. Patrice was in the living room with her laptop, doing what she described as light planning. Devon kissed her on the top of her head, asked if she needed anything, and went to change out of his work clothes. He spent the afternoon handling 2 things remotely for his job, ate a sandwich at his desk, and by evening was in the kitchen making pasta when Patrice appeared in the doorway, freshly showered, in the gray sweater she knew he liked. They ate at the table. It was pleasant. She asked about his day. He asked about hers. Toward the end of the meal, she mentioned, casually, that she had been thinking about the business timeline. Spring was the ideal window, she said. If the equity paperwork moved forward in the next few weeks, Devon set down his fork. "I actually need a few more days with it," he said. "Some of the terms. I want to read through everything carefully before I sign." Patrice smiled. Warm, patient. The smile of a woman who had nothing to worry about. "Of course," she said. "There's no rush." The call came at 7:52 in the morning. Devon was at the kitchen counter, coffee in hand, watching the backyard through the window. A neighbor's dog was cutting across the far edge of the grass. Unhurried. Like it owned the place. His phone buzzed against the counter. He glanced at the screen. Brianna. He picked it up on the second ring. "Hey, Bree." Her voice was not right. It was controlled in the way that voices get when someone has been working hard to make them sound normal and hasn't quite gotten there. "Devon, hey. I'm sorry for calling so early." "You're fine," he said. "What's going on?" A short pause. Just long enough. "I need to see you. Can we meet somewhere? Not your house, not Mom's." Another beat. Somewhere just neutral. Devon set his coffee mug down. He kept his voice easy. "Yeah, of course. When? Today?" Her voice dipped slightly on the word, like she'd been holding it. "If that works." "It works," he said. "Name a place." She chose a diner on the east side of town, the kind that had been there for 30 years and decorated like it. Vinyl booths worn soft at the edges, coffee that came without being asked. Devon arrived first. He picked a booth near the back, away from the windows, and ordered 2 coffees. He sat with his hands around his mug and waited. Brianna came in 7 minutes later. She was Devon's height exactly, with Patrice's same sharp cheekbones, but none of Patrice's composure. Her eyes were red at the rims. She had clearly slept badly, if at all. She slid into the booth across from him and wrapped her hands around the coffee mug before she said a word. Devon waited. "I was at Mom's on Sunday," she started. "Patrice was there for a couple of hours in the afternoon. She left before dinner." Brianna stared into her mug. She forgot to close out a thread on the shared tablet, the one Mom keeps on the kitchen counter. She looked up at him. "I wasn't snooping. I just picked it up to change the music." "I believe you," Devon said simply. Brianna exhaled, like she had needed to hear that. It was a message thread between Patrice and— She stopped, pressed her lips together. Between her and someone named Trent. Devon nodded, slow and easy, giving her room. I didn't read all of it. I didn't want to. Brianna's jaw tightened. But I read enough. She set the mug down. Devon, this has been going on for a long time. Almost 3 years, from what I could tell. The dates on some of those messages— She shook her head. She's been planning this. She told him the business was the last step. That once it launched and she had her own money, she was done. She made it sound like you were just something she was finishing up. Devon said nothing. He kept his face still. Trent thinks she's choosing him, Brianna said. He talks about it like it's already decided. Like they're already together, and you're just the last formality. She looked genuinely sick saying it. Devon picked up his coffee, took a slow sip, set it back down. There's more. Brianna's voice dropped. She's already told Mom and Aunt Carolyn and Aunt Denise. She watched his face. She's been telling them for months that the marriage hasn't been working, that you're closed off, that you never made her feel like a priority. Brianna's mouth pressed into a hard line. She told them she's been unhappy for years, and she's finally ready to do what's best for herself. The diner hummed quietly around them, plates and low voices and the hiss of something on a flat-top grill. Devon thought about Patrice's mother, a woman he had always treated with genuine respect, who hugged him at every family gathering, who had called him on his birthday for 3 years running. He thought about what it would look like, walking into that family without knowing what was already waiting there for him. The portrait Patrice had been painting, stroke by careful stroke. She's been managing it, he said. Not a question. Brianna nodded. She's good at that. The silence held for a moment. Brianna. Devon looked at her directly. I need you to hear me. Whatever happens next, none of it touches you. You have my word on that. Brianna's eyes filled. She didn't try to hide it. She's my sister, she said. I didn't come here to blow up her life. I just couldn't. She stopped. Tried again. You're a good man, Devon. You didn't deserve any of this. Devon looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Brief, and then still. I know, he said. That's why I'm handling it. He walked her to her car. He waited until she pulled out of the lot. Then he got into his own car, started the engine, and sat for exactly 10 seconds before he picked up his phone and called Kwame. Kwame answered on the second ring. We have everything, Devon said. Pull the equity line application. I'll call the lender myself tomorrow. Devon called the lender at 8:15 the next morning, standing at the kitchen counter in the same spot he'd been standing when Brianna called the day before. Patrice was still asleep. The house was quiet, except for the coffee maker finishing its cycle. The loan officer picked up on the third ring. Her name was Sandra. Devon had spoken with her twice before, once during the initial application, once during approval. She had a warm, professional voice, and remembered his name. Mr. Ashworth, good morning. What can I help you with? I need to withdraw the application, Devon said. The equity line. I've had a change in financial circumstances, and I won't be moving forward. A brief pause. The sound of keys. Of course. I can process that this morning. Is there anything we can do to— No, Devon said. Politely, completely. I appreciate everything. I just need it closed out. Understood. You'll receive a standard confirmation letter within a few business days. That's fine, Devon said. Thank you, Sandra. He hung up, poured his coffee, went and got ready for work. He said nothing to Patrice that day. He said nothing the next day either. He came home on time both evenings, asked about her recovery, ate dinner across from her, and listened to her talk about vendor calls she'd made and a color palette she was finalizing for a client proposal. She was animated when she talked about the business. Genuinely. That part, at least, had always been real. Devon listened, asked questions, washed the dishes after. He slept without difficulty. He had made his decisions. There was nothing left to be anxious about. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Devon was at work when his phone lit up. Patrice's name on the screen. He was in the middle of a walkthrough with one of his maintenance leads, checking HVAC drainage on the second floor. He held up one finger, stepped a few feet down the hallway, and answered. "Hey." Her voice was smooth, but the rhythm was off, just slightly, like a song played a half-step too slow. "I got a letter today from the lender." "Okay," Devon said. A beat. "It says the application was withdrawn." "That's right." Another pause, longer this time. She was recalibrating. He could almost hear it. "Devon, what's going on?" "I thought we were finalizing. I've been looking more carefully at our debt exposure," he said. "I got uncomfortable with the numbers. It didn't feel like the right time to take on that kind of liability." "That's—" She stopped. Started again. "That's a conversation we should have had together." "You're right," he said. "And we will. I'll explain everything when I get home." She said, "Okay." The word was flat and careful, the way her words got when she was thinking hard and not ready to let that show. She was ready for him when he walked through the door that evening. He could see it in the way she was sitting at the kitchen table, upright, both hands around a glass of water, dinner already made. She had set the table. She had composed herself. She had a version of this conversation prepared. Devon set his bag down, washed his hands, and sat across from her. "Walk me through it," she said. Her voice was measured. Her eyes were not. Devon served himself from the dish she'd made, a pasta, something with roasted tomatoes, and looked at her with the same calm expression he'd been wearing for 2 weeks now. "I've been doing a thorough review of where we stand financially," he said. "The equity line made sense when I first applied, but I've been looking more carefully at our full picture, and I'm not comfortable pulling against the house right now. Not with the market the way it is." Her jaw moved slightly. "Devon, the business launch is dependent on that funding. You know that. We've been planning around it." "I know," he said. "That's part of what I want to sit down and talk through properly." He took a slow bite, chewed, set his fork down. "There are some things I've been wanting to discuss with you. About where we are. About what I've been thinking." He met her eyes. "Let's do it this weekend. Properly. Sit down together with clear heads." Patrice looked at him for a moment. Searching. There was something in her expression that was not quite fear, and not quite suspicion. Something in between. Something newer. She had not expected this version of him. "Fine," she said finally. "Saturday." "Saturday." Devon agreed. He finished his dinner. She finished hers. The table was quiet in a way it had never quite been before. Not the comfortable quiet of two people who didn't need to talk, but the taut and humming quiet of a wire pulled tight. In the days that followed, Patrice called Audra twice. Devon didn't know the exact content of those calls, but he knew they happened. He also didn't know about the third call, the one she made from her car, parked down the street, the evening after their dinner. The one that went to Trent. Devon came home from work on Friday evening and set his bag on the kitchen counter. He unzipped it. He removed the documentation folder, thick now, organized, every page in order, and placed it flat on the counter beside the stove. Then he opened the refrigerator and began preparing dinner for two. Devon set the table the way he always set it when he cooked something worth sitting down for. 2 full-place settings. The good plates, white with a thin gray rim. A wedding gift from Patrice's aunt. Cloth napkins folded once. Water glasses filled. Fork on the left, knife on the right. The way his grandmother taught him before he was old enough to reach the counter without a step stool. The food was on the stove. Roasted chicken, rice, green beans with a little garlic and lemon. Simple. The kind of meal that took care and didn't announce it. The documentation folder sat in the center of the table where a candle would normally be. Closed, squared to the table's edge. Devon had organized it that morning before Patrice was awake. Bank records first, then the hotel confirmation, then the written timeline he had typed and printed at work. 3 pages, clean and precise. Every transfer, every date. Every weekend trip cross-referenced against the shared calendar, against the marriage milestones he had tracked, without knowing he was tracking them. He had not been angry when he put it together. He had been thorough. Patrice came downstairs at 6:40. She had dressed for this, not formally, but deliberately. Hair done. A blouse Devon recognized. She had prepared herself to be persuasive, and she had chosen her clothes accordingly. She stopped when she saw the table. Her eyes moved to the folder, then to Devon, standing at the stove with his back to her. "Sit down," Devon said, quietly. "Food's almost ready." She sat. She did not reach for the folder. Devon brought the food over, served both plates, set the pans back on the stove, and sat down across from her. He picked up the folder, opened it, and laid it flat in front of her, without a word. She looked down at the top page. Bank records, her own name in the transaction column, transfers to an account Devon had never been given access to, dated back 2.5 years. 19 transactions. The amounts were listed neatly in the right-hand column. "I was in the hallway," Devon said. "Outside your hospital room. You were talking to Audra." Patrice looked up. Devon's voice was even. Not soft, not hard. Just level, like a surface you could measure things against. "I heard everything you said." He let that sit for a moment. "I've known for 2 weeks. I've spent those 2 weeks making sure I understood the full picture before I said anything to you. Devon, let me finish. Not loud, just final." She closed her mouth. He told her what he'd heard. Not summarized, word for word, the parts that mattered. The best investment I ever made. His credit score and his silence. He watched her face as he spoke, and he felt nothing he wasn't expecting to feel. A low, steady ache. The kind that had already settled in so deep it no longer surprised him. He told her about the hotel in Charlotte. He turned to the confirmation page and set his finger on the line. Patrice Ashworth and Trent Fairfax, and left it there for a moment before moving on. He told her he knew about the story she'd been building with her mother and her aunts. The emotionally withholding husband, the unhappy wife. The narrative she had been quietly laying down like groundwork before the house was even started. Patrice's first move was denial. Instinctive, smooth, almost convincing. Devon turned to the next page of the timeline and pointed to a date. Her mouth closed. Then she pivoted. Her chin came up slightly. Her voice found a different register. Wounded, tired. The register of someone who had been waiting to be heard. "You want to talk about this marriage? Devon, I have been unhappy." "I know you have," Devon said. "Page 3 covers the anniversary trip I planned for your 35th birthday. The weekend I put $1,100 on the card and took 3 days off work. You were in Charlotte with Trent 6 weeks later." He turned to the page. "The dates are there." Her mouth stayed open for a moment. Nothing came out. Devon set his hands flat on the table. "Here are 3 things I need you to hear clearly." He said them the way he had rehearsed them. Not for effect, but because precision mattered, and he had earned the right to be precise. "Kwame Osei has been retained. He will file this week." A pause. "The house is separate property. I inherited it before our marriage. Your attorney will confirm this independently. I'm not asking you to take my word for it." Another pause. "The equity line no longer exists. I withdrew the application 10 days ago." The color in Patrice's face shifted. Something moved behind her eyes. Calculation, fear, and something else. Something that might have been the first real understanding of the situation she was standing in. "I'm asking you to be out within 30 days, Devon said. Kwame can have the formal notice to you by Monday if you prefer it in writing. Patrice said nothing. For the first time since Devon had known her, she had nothing arranged and ready. Devon picked up his fork and turned his attention to his plate. The chicken was good. The rice had come out right. He ate. Patrice left the table without a word some time before he finished. He heard her footsteps on the stairs. A door closing, not quite a slam, somewhere between punctuation and collapse. Devon sat alone in the kitchen. The overhead light was warm. The house was still. He finished what was on his plate, folded his napkin, and carried both dishes to the sink. He ran the water warm, added a little soap, and washed his plate and his glass, slowly, the way he did when there was no particular reason to hurry. Then he washed hers, too. 3 days after the dinner, Patrice called a family gathering. Devon found out through Brianna. A short text, 7 words. She called a meeting. Sunday. Mom's house. No punctuation. No explanation needed. He texted back, "I'll be there." The drive to Patrice's mother's house took 22 minutes. Devon made it in silence. No music. Windows up. The neighborhood was the kind of quiet that came from people living carefully. Trimmed lawns, clean driveways, flower beds that got attention. He had driven this road dozens of times, brought casseroles here, helped move furniture, fixed a leaking bathroom faucet one Saturday afternoon while Patrice and her mother sat in the kitchen and talked. He parked at the curb. He checked his phone once, confirmed what he needed was there, and got out of the car. The living room was arranged the way it always was for anything that mattered. Patrice's mother, Gloria, sat in her chair near the window. 2 aunts on the couch, Delia and Margaret. Brianna sat in the armchair near the hallway, apart from the others, her hands folded in her lap. She did not look up when Devon came in. Patrice stood near the fireplace. She had dressed carefully again. She had the posture of someone who had rehearsed. Devon greeted Gloria first. He shook her hand and held it a moment. He nodded to the aunts. He took the open chair near the door and sat with his hands resting on his knees, and he waited. Patrice spoke. Her voice was measured, warm, carrying just the right weight of sadness, the tone of a reasonable woman doing a hard thing. She talked about incompatibility, about 2 people who wanted different things, about years of trying. She used words like drift and distance and mutual. She did not say Trent's name. She did not say anything that wasn't technically deniable. Her mother nodded slowly, the way mothers do when they've already been told the story and are watching it confirmed. Devon listened without expression. He let her finish completely. When the room went quiet, and Gloria looked at him, expecting perhaps an argument or an apology or nothing at all, Devon reached into his jacket pocket and took out his phone. He found the voicemail. He pressed play and set the phone on the coffee table. Patrice's voice filled the room. She was laughing, light and easy, the way she laughed when she didn't know anyone was measuring her. She was talking to Trent. His name said the way you say the name of someone you've been thinking about all day. Making plans. A specific hotel. A specific date. A tone in her voice that had nothing to do with drift or distance or mutual incompatibility. 28 seconds. Devon had timed it. He picked the phone up and put it back in his pocket. The room was completely still. Aunt Delia had her hand pressed flat against her collarbone. Margaret was looking at the carpet. Gloria's expression had not moved, but something behind it had shifted. The slow, heavy movement of a belief being revised. Brianna stared at the floor. Her jaw was tight. She did not look at her sister. Patrice's mouth had opened slightly. She closed it. Devon looked at Gloria directly. He spoke the way he always spoke to her, with respect, without performance. "I'm not here to cause harm," he said. "I came because a lie was going to stand in this room, and I couldn't allow that. Not here. Not with you." He paused. "I love this family. That part was always real. I need you to know that, too." He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and thanked Gloria for her home. He left without looking at Patrice. He called Kwame from the car. 2 words: file it. The week that followed moved the way Devon had expected it to. Kwame's fraternity brother, the corporate communications director who had been close to signing with Trent's consultancy, had a conversation with Kwame. Nothing fabricated, just honest contact, offered calmly, about who Trent Fairfax was and how he operated. The director decided the relationship felt complicated. He passed. 2 other referrals went quiet the same week. The way these things go when word travels through professional circles, not loudly, but efficiently, like water finding its level. Trent texted Devon on a Thursday. The message was short and poorly aimed, part olive branch, part territorial signal. He suggested a meeting, man to man. Devon read it once, set his phone down, and did not think about it again until Sunday evening, when he picked up his phone and typed, "I know exactly what this situation is. I don't meet with men who conduct themselves the way you do." He sent it and went to bed. Trent called Patrice. Devon did not know exactly what was said, only that Brianna described the call later in 4 words. It didn't go well, and that after it, Trent went quiet. Then unreachable, then simply gone, the way men like Trent go when the math stops working in their favor. 6 months passed. The divorce was finalized on a Wednesday. Devon heard from Kwame by phone, calm, brief, the tone of a man reporting a thing he was never worried about. Patrice received her personal property, her car, and her share of the joint account as it stood on the date of separation. The house remained Devon's, as it had always been. Her attorney had confirmed the separate property question without contest. The event planning business had launched. Underfunded, slower than she'd planned, working against the grain of what she'd hoped. Devon did not follow its progress closely. He did not need to. He took a long weekend to Atlanta. He slept well in a hotel room with blackout curtains and no alarm set. He ate good food and laughed with his college roommate until his face hurt. He came home rested. He brought the woodworking equipment out of the back of the garage, where it had been sitting under a tarp for 2 years. Patrice had found sawdust inconvenient. He set up the workbench, oiled what needed oiling, and started small. A bookshelf, 4 shelves, clean lines, no ornament. On a Saturday morning in early spring, Devon was in the garage, music playing low through the small Bluetooth speaker on the shelf. The air smelled like cut wood and motor oil. He was fitting the second shelf into its dado joint, checking the angle, adjusting by fractions. His phone lit up on the workbench. An unknown number. Devon glanced at it. He let it ring. He picked up his tool and kept building. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.